In the vast expanse of deep space, where the boundary between miracle and medicine often blurs, I never expected to find myself treating an alien princess. The emergency alert had blared through our medical outpost at 300 hours Earth Standard Time, just another night shift until it wasn't. I remember looking through the reinforced windows of our station, watching the sleek diplomatic vessel pierce through the dark void, its hull gleaming under the light of twin moons. Human medical assistance required. The transmission had crackled. Royal medical emergency. Urgency level. Critical. Even after 5 years as a frontier medic, those words still made my heart race. The universe had a way of throwing curveballs at us humans, especially since first contact changed everything we thought we knew about our place among the stars. As the airlock cycled and pressurized, I grabbed my enhanced med kit, a fascinating blend of human ingenuity and alien tech that I'd modified over the years. The royal guards that rushed in were tall, their iridescent scales shifting colors with every movement, but it was their expressions of worry that caught my attention. In their culture, showing emotion was considered a sign of extreme distress. Behind them, supported by what I assumed was her personal aide, stood the princess. Her usually luminescent skin had dulled to an alarming shade of gray, and the bio readings on my scanner were going haywire. The universal translator struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire explanation from her aide, something about a diplomatic dinner, an allergic reaction, and their own medical treatments failing. Here's the thing about being a human medic in space. We're adaptable. While alien species often evolved with specialized biological systems, humans developed as generalists. Our medical knowledge, built on centuries of treating an incredibly diverse single species, gave us a unique edge in understanding cross-species care. Sometimes, the simplest human solutions worked where advanced alien technology failed. I won't forget the moment I realized what was happening. Her symptoms matched a case I'd seen back on Earth, of all places. The princess's body was fighting against a common preservative used in diplomatic food preparations, something her species had never encountered before. As I prepared the treatment, her guards watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Could this human, from a younger spacefaring race, succeed where their advanced medical technology had failed? The next few minutes felt like hours. I administered the modified antihistamine compound, my hands steady despite the weight of 7 royal guards, stares burning into my back. The princess's aide gripped her hand, mandibles clicking in what I'd learned was a sign of extreme anxiety. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Then gradually, her skin began to brighten, the labored breathing eased, and her bio readings stabilized. The relief in the room was palpable, but what happened next would change my life forever. The princess opened her 4th eye, a sign of deep emotional significance in their culture, and a single crystalline tear rolled down her cheek. In their society, tears were incredibly rare, produced only in moments of profound gratitude or sorrow. She reached out and touched my hand with her own, a gesture that I later learned was reserved for family and those who had earned the highest honor. The guards gasped. The aide's mandibles stopped mid-click, and there I stood, a human medic from a small outpost on the edge of known space, suddenly thrust into a moment of unprecedented diplomatic significance. But what I didn't know then, as I watched that crystalline tear fall, was that this was just the beginning. The events that would follow would challenge everything I thought I knew about interspecies relations, human potential, and the true meaning of healing across the stars. The next few hours passed in a blur of diplomatic protocols and medical documentation. As I updated the princess's charts, her aide, who introduced herself as Vexera, explained the gravity of what had just transpired. The tear shed by Princess Lyris wasn't just a show of emotion. It was a biological miracle. Their species could only produce tears once in their lifetime, and the chemical composition of those tears was considered sacred. "Your actions today," Vexera had said, her voice trembling with reverence, "have bound you to the royal house in ways no other off-worlder has ever been." I remember sitting there in my small office, still in my slightly wrinkled medical uniform, trying to process the fact that I'd somehow stumbled into what amounted to an intergalactic fairy tale. But the universe wasn't done throwing surprises my way. As I was preparing to end my shift, a priority message came through from the Galactic Medical Council. Apparently, news of the incident had already spread through official channels, and they wanted a full report, not just about the treatment. They were particularly interested in how a human medic had succeeded where the most advanced medical systems in 3 sectors had failed. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. The solution had come from my grandmother's old medical journals, paper books she kept from her days as an emergency room doctor in rural areas. She always said that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, especially when you had to think on your feet. Who would have thought her wisdom would end up saving an alien princess? The following days brought a steady stream of visiting dignitaries and medical researchers to our humble outpost. Each wanted to understand the human factor in medical care. Princess Laris remained in our medical bay for observation, though her condition had fully stabilized. During quiet moments between the chaos, she would ask me about Earth, about human medicine, and about how we managed to survive and thrive despite our relatively short lifespans. "Your species fascinates me," she said one evening, her scales shimmering with curiosity. "You live such brief lives, yet you accomplish so much. You adapt, you innovate, you heal, not just yourselves, but others too." Her words carried a weight I couldn't quite understand at the time, but I would soon learn their true significance. What none of us knew then was that this incident would become the catalyst for a major shift in intergalactic medicine. The Galactic Medical Council had always viewed human medical practices as primitive, relying too heavily on intuition and adaptability rather than pure technology. But now they were beginning to see something they'd missed before. I was in the middle of explaining the concept of holistic healing to a group of alien medical students when the alert came through. Another diplomatic vessel was approaching, but this time it wasn't seeking medical help. The royal insignia it carried was different, ancient and rarely seen. My heart nearly stopped when Vexera burst into the room, her scales shifting to a color I'd never seen before. "They're here," she whispered, her translator struggling to convey the mixture of awe and anxiety in her voice. "The keepers of the sacred archives. They say," she paused, mandibles quivering, "they say there's a prophecy about this, about a human healer and a princess's tear, about what it means for the future of both our peoples." I looked down at my worn medical badge, then back at the approaching ship on the monitor. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could hear my grandmother's voice. Medicine isn't just about knowing what to do. It's about being there when it matters most. I had a feeling I was about to find out just how true those words were. The keepers of the sacred archives arrived with all the ceremony you'd expect from beings who guarded the oldest secrets in the galaxy. Their robes seemed to absorb light itself, and their movements were so fluid they appeared to float rather than walk. The head keeper, a being so ancient that their scales had turned translucent, approached me with an object that looked like a cross between a book and a living crystal. Within these pages, they spoke, their words bypassing the translator and somehow appearing directly in my mind, lies a prophecy written 10,000 years ago. It speaks of a time when the barriers between species would begin to fall, marked by a healer from a young race and a princess's sacred tear. The crystal book pulsed with a soft light as they opened it, revealing text that shifted and moved like living things. Princess Laris stood beside me, her presence both regal and somehow comforting as the keeper began to read. The prophecy spoke of a great challenge coming to the galaxy, a threat that couldn't be fought with weapons or technology alone. It would require something that only humans, with their unique approach to healing and adaptation, could provide. But there's more. Vexera interrupted, her scales flickering with excitement and worry. "Tell them about the crossing." The head keeper's expression shifted, and even through their alien features, I could read their concern. The crossing, they explained, was a mysterious phenomenon that occurred every 1,000 years, when the boundaries between different dimensions of space became thin. The next crossing was due in less than a week, and according to the prophecy, it would bring with it a pandemic that no single species' medical knowledge could cure. The princess's tear, combined with human medical insights, was supposedly the key to saving billions of lives across the galaxy. But the prophecy was frustratingly vague about exactly how this would work. I found myself poring over my grandmother's old medical journals again, looking for anything that might help, while the princess worked with her own healers to analyze the chemical composition of her crystallized tear. The keepers maintained a constant vigil, their presence both reassuring and unnerving as they watched our every move with their ancient, knowing eyes. Time was running out. The first signs of the crossing had already begun to appear: strange auroras in space, unexplained energy readings, and most worryingly, reports of an unknown illness starting to spread on the outer colonies. Each hour brought new cases, and none of the advanced medical technologies of any species seemed to help. I was about to start another round of research when the princess burst into my office, her scales practically glowing with excitement. "I think I've found something," she said, holding up a data crystal. "When you treated me, your human medicine didn't just cure the allergic reaction. It somehow changed the molecular structure of my tear. It's doing something I've never seen before." We were in the middle of analyzing her discovery when the station's alarms began blaring. Through the viewport, we could see it. The crossing had begun early. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear, revealing glimpses of other dimensions, and with it came the first wave of the pandemic, reaching our station far sooner than anyone had predicted. As medical alerts flooded in from all directions and the quarantine protocols activated, I looked at the princess's crystallized tear sitting in its containment field, then at my grandmother's weathered old journal, and finally at the ancient prophecy still hovering in the air. The answer was there, somewhere in the connection between all three, but we were running out of time to figure it out. The head keeper approached us, their ancient eyes filled with an urgency I hadn't seen before. "The prophecy speaks of a choice," they said gravely, "one that must be made in the next few moments. But it warns that the price of saving billions could be more than any single person should bear." The keeper's words hung in the air like a physical weight as alerts continued blaring around us. But before they could explain the choice we faced, the station's artificial gravity suddenly flickered. Through the viewport, we watched in horror as the crossing's dimensional rifts began to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, sending waves of energy that made my medical equipment go haywire. "This isn't right," Vexera declared, her mandibles clicking rapidly as she analyzed the readings. "The crossing, it's different from all our historical records. Something, or someone, is interfering with it." The princess's scales shifted to a deep violet, a color I'd never seen before, as she studied the data streaming across our monitors. That's when we made a chilling discovery. The pandemic wasn't just a natural consequence of the crossing. It was engineered. Hidden in the molecular structure of the virus were patterns too precise to be random. Someone had been waiting for this moment, using the crossing as a delivery system for what could be the perfect biological weapon. The prophecy, the head keeper whispered, their translucent scales now glowing with an inner light. It wasn't just about finding a cure. It was a warning about this exact moment. They turned to the crystal book, which now showed new text, revealing itself only in this crisis. The ancient words spoke of a species lost to time, one that had sworn revenge against all other life in the galaxy. Princess Lyris grabbed my arm, her touch sending a jolt of urgency through me. "Your human medicine," she said, "combined with my tear, it's not just a cure, it's a key." She explained that when I had treated her allergic reaction, my simple human solution had unknowingly activated something dormant in her species' sacred tears, something placed there eons ago by her ancestors. The station shuddered again as another wave of dimensional energy washed over us. Through the chaos, I noticed something odd about my grandmother's journal. Under the strange light of the crossing, certain pages seemed to shimmer with hidden text. Apparently, my grandmother had known more than she'd ever let on. The margins were filled with notes about cross-species medicine, written in a code I was only now beginning to understand. "There's another problem," Vexera announced, her voice tight with concern. "The cure, if we synthesize it, it will require a living host to distribute it through the dimensional rifts. And according to these readings," she paused, mandibles trembling, "the process would rewrite the host's entire genetic structure. They would become something neither human nor alien." The head keeper nodded solemnly. "This is the choice the prophecy speaks of. To save billions, one must sacrifice their very essence, their humanity or their alien nature. But the text warns of a third option, one that could be even more dangerous. They gestured to a passage that seemed to write itself before our eyes, speaking of a way to merge human and alien together in a way never before attempted. As if to punctuate the gravity of our situation, the medical bay's quarantine alarms began screaming. The first cases of the engineered virus had reached our station, and our containment protocols were already failing. Through the isolation ward's windows, I could see medical staff of various species working desperately to save the afflicted, their movements becoming more urgent with each passing moment. The princess's crystallized tear pulsed in its containment field, resonating with both the dimensional rifts and something hidden within the pages of my grandmother's journal. All the pieces were there, but assembling them would require a decision that would reshape not just one life, but potentially the very nature of life in our galaxy. "We have to choose now," the princess said, her scales shifting through colors I didn't even know existed. "But there's something they're not telling us about the third option, something in those ancient texts that has them terrified." She looked at me with all four eyes, and I saw in them a reflection of the impossible choice we faced. The third option became clear as the princess and I simultaneously reached for the crystallized tear. The moment our hands touched it, my grandmother's journal burst open, pages fluttering to a hidden section written in what looked like a combination of human and ancient alien script. The head keeper moved to stop us, but Vexera blocked their path, her scales blazing with determination. The prophecy never spoke of one savior. I realized aloud, the hidden text suddenly making sense. It was always meant to be both of us. The princess nodded, her fourth eye opening fully as understanding dawned. The ancient texts hadn't warned against the third option out of fear. They'd hidden it to ensure it would only be discovered by those who could see beyond the artificial boundaries between species. Together, we decoded the true meaning of my grandmother's notes. She hadn't just been writing about cross-species medicine. She'd been part of a secret group of human and alien healers who had been preparing for this moment for generations. The journal contained the missing piece, a way to merge the healing properties of the princess's tear with human adaptability without sacrificing either of our essential natures. The station's warning systems reached a fever pitch as more dimensional rifts tore open around us. Through the medical bay windows, we could see the virus spreading, leaving trails of shimmering energy in its wake. But now we knew what we had to do. The princess placed her hands on the tear crystal while I prepared a modified version of the treatment I'd originally used to save her life. The prophecy speaks of balance. The keeper finally admitted, their ancient eyes showing something like hope. Not sacrifice, but synthesis. As they spoke these words, the crystal book flew open to its final pages, revealing illustrations of human and alien DNA strands weaving together in impossible patterns. What happened next defied every law of science I thought I knew. As we initiated the procedure, the princess's tear began to resonate with both the human medicine and the dimensional energies around us. The crystal dissolved, forming a bridge of pure light between us. I felt every cell in my body singing in harmony with alien frequencies, while the princess's scales shifted through colors that shouldn't exist in our dimension. The engineered virus had been designed to exploit the differences between species, but in doing so, its creators had overlooked the most fundamental truth about life, its endless capacity to adapt and evolve. Our merged healing energy spread through the rifts like a cascade of starlight, not fighting the virus but transforming it, turning its own adaptability against it. Throughout the station, then across space itself, we watched as the pandemic changed. Instead of destroying life, it began connecting it in ways never thought possible. The virus became a carrier not of death, but of understanding, allowing different species to momentarily experience each other's existence. As the dimensional rifts began to seal, I looked down at my hands, expecting to see them forever changed. Instead, I saw them exactly as they had always been, yet somehow more. The princess too remained herself, but her scales now carried a subtle iridescence that seemed to mirror human DNA patterns. "The choice was never about sacrificing what we are," she said, touching the spot where her tear had been. "It was about proving we could be more without losing ourselves." Vexdera's instruments confirmed what we could already feel. The pandemic was over, transformed into something that would forever change how species across the galaxy understood each other. The head keeper approached us, their ancient form seeming both more solid and more ephemeral than before. "There is one final part of the prophecy," they said, their voice carrying an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "What you have started here. It's only the beginning. The true healing has just begun." As if in response to their words, my grandmother's journal began to glow with the same subtle iridescence as the princess's scales, revealing one last hidden message. To those who find this, sometimes the greatest medical breakthrough isn't discovering something new, but learning to see what was always there. In the days that followed, our small medical outpost became the center of a galactic revolution in healing. Species that had never been able to communicate before found themselves sharing not just words, but experiences. The transformed virus had left behind a subtle change in all it touched, not a mutation, but an awakening of dormant potential that had always existed within every species. My grandmother's journal proved to be more than just a family heirloom. It was part of a vast network of human and alien medical knowledge, carefully preserved and passed down through generations of healers who had understood that true medicine transcended species boundaries. Other human medics across the galaxy began discovering similar hidden messages in their own family records, revealing a centuries-old preparation for this moment. Princess Laris and I continued our work together, but now as equals in a new field of medicine we called harmonic healing. Her tears, though no longer crystallized, had left her with the ability to sense the subtle connections between different species' life forces. Combined with human medical intuition, we found ourselves solving medical mysteries that had puzzled the galaxy for millennia. The keepers of the sacred archives, after much deliberation, chose to make their knowledge freely available to all species. "The time of keeping secrets is over," they announced, their ancient forms seeming lighter somehow, as if relieved of a long-carried burden. The crystal book that had contained the prophecy was transformed into a living database, accessible to anyone seeking to understand the interconnected nature of all life. Vexera took on the role of chief researcher at the newly established Interstellar Medical Academy, where she led efforts to document and understand the changes spreading through the galaxy. Every day, she told me during one of our late-night research sessions, we discover new ways that different species can help each other heal. It's like the universe was just waiting for us to realize we were never meant to be separate. The dimensional rifts left behind traces that our instruments could now detect, bridges between species that had always existed but that we'd never been able to see before. These became known as healing channels, and learning to work with them revolutionized emergency medicine across the galaxy. Distance was no longer a barrier when it came to providing medical care. As for my small medical bay where it all began, it grew into something I never could have imagined. Species from across the galaxy began sending their healers to learn what we now called human intuitive medicine, alongside advanced alien techniques. The sight of human doctors working seamlessly with alien healers became commonplace, each bringing their unique perspectives to create something greater than the sum of its parts. One evening, as I sat in my office updating patient records, I found one last note in my grandmother's journal that I hadn't noticed before. The greatest healers, she had written, are those who understand that medicine isn't just about curing illness. It's about bridging the gaps between all living things. Never forget that every being in this vast universe carries within them the potential to heal and be healed. Princess Laris, now a regular visitor to what had become the galaxy's premier medical research facility, often reminded me of that first emergency call that had started it all. "You humans have a saying," she told me once, her scales shimmering with what I now recognized as joy, about butterflies and hurricanes. One small act of healing created ripples that transformed the galaxy. But then again, she added, all four eyes twinkling, that's what the prophecy was really about, not the grand gesture, but the simple choice to help someone in need. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson in all of this, that sometimes the most profound changes come not from great powers or ancient prophecies, but from the simple decision to reach across the divide and help another being in need. In the end, it wasn't about becoming something new. It was about finally recognizing what we had been all along. One galaxy, one people, one shared destiny.